I call the special meeting of the Milwaukie City Council to order. This meeting is being held in person at the Ledding Library and by video conference. The public may participate in this meeting by coming to the library or by joining the Zoom webinar. There will be opportunities for the public to speak during this meeting. If you would like to address council, you may come to the library or participate via Zoom. If you are interested in speaking, please let staff know by filling out a yellow comment card for those at the library or by emailing OCR@milwaukieoregon.gov for those on Zoom. When it is time to take public comments, staff will monitor the comment cards, email inbox, and Zoom participant list and chat. We will take comments in the order they are received and seen. Comments may be emailed to OCR@milwaukieoregon.gov. We ask that all Zoom participants who intend to speak label their Zoom username to show their first and last names for the record. Spanish translation services are available upon request. The public is asked to request translation and other meeting accessibility services at least 48 hours before the meeting. For more information, contact the city recorder at 503-786-7502. Servicio de traducción en español está disponible cuando sea solicitado. Se pide al público que solicite servicios de traducción y otros servicios de accesibilidad por lo menos 48 horas antes de la reunión. Para obtener más información, llama al secretario de la ciudad a 503-786-7502. Translation services are also available in other languages. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. The city of Milwaukie respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya etc. Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. And now we have our announcements and winter events update. So I'll start with the usual slide of announcements. Support Llewellyn Elementary School at a holiday market on Saturday, November 18th. That's this Saturday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. The event will include vendors, prizes, and food. Proceeds benefit the Llewellyn PTO. Hosting free leaf drop sessions for those who live in city limits on Saturday, November 18th and December 2nd, 9th, and 16th. From 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Public Works Yard. To participate, bring an electronic or paper utility bill for proof of residence. Leaves are accepted in paper bags, plastic bags, or loose. However, paper bags are preferred. This service is free, but the city will collect non-perishable food for local families in need during each session. The annual Thanksgiving Milwaukie Farmers Market is back this Sunday, November 19th from 9:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. Stock up on the farm-grown produce and ingredients for the holidays. Visit the Milwaukie Community Center to celebrate winter holiday traditions from different cultures through music, games, and food on Saturday, December 2nd from 9:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. Save the date and start decorating your umbrellas for the annual umbrella parade and tree lighting on Saturday, December 2nd from 4 to 6 p.m. The event starts at the South Downtown Plaza and ends at Historic City Hall for the lighting of the tree. Mark your calendars for the annual Winter Solstice and Christmas Ships viewing event on Saturday, December 16th from 4:30 to 7:30 p.m. at Milwaukie Bay Park. Come out to view the ships, warmed by a fire, and purchase some tasty food for a great cause. For information about each of these events and others, please visit the city's homepage at milwaukieoregon.gov or call 503-786-7555. We're gonna have a little bit more of an update in a minute from Dan Harris, but I wanted to highlight that and thank Celebrate Milwaukie Inc., which is the parent organization of the Farmers Market, for bringing back their downtown holiday decorating contest. Something they did for several years and it fell off the last couple of years, but any downtown business that decorates will be considered. There's no application that has to be filled out or anything. You just have to have your decorations on and lit by December the 1st, because they will be judged on the evening of December the 1st so that the winners can be announced the next day at the tree lighting. Cash prizes, $300 for first prize, $200 for second, and $100 for third. And so I hope to see a lot of festive storefronts and windows this season. And with that, I will turn it over to our Events and Emergency Management Coordinator, Dan Harris, to tell us a little bit more about winter events. Thank you, Dan. Well, I cannot see what I'm trying to do.
While they're getting set up there, I might just reiterate that I need to leave at 7:15 this evening. So I'll follow up and watch these. Thank you. Apologies.
Oh, and I thank you for that, and I should note that Commissioner Koshabati is not with us tonight and is excused. So, Dan, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Beatty, Council. So good to see you all once again. My name is Dan Harris. As you mentioned, I am the Events and Emergency Management Coordinator for the City of Milwaukie, and I have the very real pleasure this evening of telling you about our two upcoming winter events. The first of those, boy, it would be good if that button worked the way I thought it did. But it's over here now. Okay. To the right, is that what we're doing? Oh, hey, Nicole, how do I connect this back to the screen? There it is, got it. Sorry.
You got it? You got it?
I think so. Do I got it? I do got it. Great. So the first of those is the Umbrella Parade and Tree Lighting, which is coming up on December 2nd. As previously mentioned, it's going to be from 4 to 6 p.m. We say the location here is Main Street because the truth is if folks want to come and participate in the parade, they can do that beginning at about 4 o'clock down at South Downtown Plaza, which is immediately adjacent to the post office. The parade will step off at 4:30. So if you don't make it right at 4, that's just fine. But if you're hoping to enter the contest in one of our 3 categories, which include most original, most festive, and most Milwaukie, you'll want to be there by 4:15. So the Events Committee has plenty of time to judge your entry. Entries can be submitted in either the adult or youth categories, and we have prizes for both. Actually, following a suggestion that you made earlier this year, Mayor Beatty, in a different capacity, the adult prizes this year are going to be 72-hour bags. So good start for preparedness. This is an annual event for those who have not attended previously. The idea is essentially that you can take and decorate an umbrella. You don't have to decorate an umbrella. You don't have to bring an umbrella at all to participate in the parade. But if you would like to, you can decorate an umbrella and come out and celebrate. The parade goes from the South Downtown Plaza all the way about a quarter of a mile, just a little shy of a quarter of a mile, to historic City Hall, where we will do the tree lighting. And that tree lighting will take place beginning between 5:15 and 5:30. So for folks who just want to attend the tree lighting, definitely want to be there no later than 5:15. That all being said, at the tree lighting portion of the event, we're also going to have refreshments, which are partially funded and handed out by the Milwaukie Rotary Club. The Rotary Club of Milwaukie. One day I'm going to put that in the correct order. I'd also like to thank Milwaukie CERT, Celebrate Milwaukie Inc., Plastics Fire District 1, the Milwaukie High School Band, and the American Legion Post 180 Honor Guard, little late entry there. These events quite literally could not happen in the way that we like to see them without their participation and support. Also, the Solstice event coming up on December 16th from 4:30 to 7:30 in the Milwaukie Bay Park boat ramp. Come on out and see fire and food and ships, I'm told. Ships on the river, Christmas ships, in fact. This is, as I said, at Milwaukie Bay Park down by the boat ramp, and there again, Milwaukie CERT, Celebrate Milwaukie Inc., Clackamas Water Environment Services, the Llewellyn and Ardenwald Johnson Creek Neighborhood District Associations make the magic happen. There is no contest directly associated with this, so no pressure there at all. Not that there should be a whole lot of pressure in an entirely recreational umbrella contest at the other event. But if folks do have any questions about any of this, they're welcome to visit our city website, again, milwaukieoregon.gov/events, or just email me directly, harrisd@milwaukieoregon.gov. Questions?
Any questions for Dan? Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Know we'll see a lot of the community out at these events, we also do.
These are some fun ones. Oh, and I did confirm today, Millie will be in attendance at the umbrella parade.
Oh,
It's a big fan favorite. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and so our next speaker is our Metro Councilor, Christine Lewis, who's here to give us just an update on all things Metro. Haven't heard from her in a while. Can't remember how long ago the last one was, but it's good to get an update on what's going on at the Metro level.
Yeah, thanks for having me back and thanks for inviting me to your special session. I think we started scheduling this in like post-budget season, so June or July, and was excited to get on your non-formal work session. Because I think that there's a lot going on and I'm excited to share. And I did stop by your new city hall on the way here because I didn't look at the calendar completely, and congratulations on that. It's a beautiful building. But again, for the record, my name is Christine Lewis, and I'm honored to get to represent this part of the region on Metro Council. And just wanted to stop by with some of the updates of what we're working on at Metro, but want to also reserve some time for discussion about how we can be more collaborative and work together. I'm facing a similar challenge.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. What do I think was it the return?
Maybe.
Okay,
It
okay.
I'll work a little differently in Adobe, so.
Great, okay.
Oh, no, it's not, it was.
Anyway, I'm just gonna go without it.
Well, no, let
Okay.
Nicole, let's give her a minute.
Everybody on
Get
Zoom
it.
can see it, but
There we go.
rest of the group can.
Can you go back? I don't know how to go back.
Yeah.
There we go.
There.
There we
we go. Okay.
Awesome, thank you. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is our work in garbage and recycling. Obviously, we have done a lot across the region to really make sure that we're responsive to the state that we were in coming out of COVID. We are with our RID patrol back up to 1-day response. And that means when there is illegally dumped items in the right of way, within 24 hours of getting the report, we are generally out there collecting the items. And RID has collected 880 tons of garbage from our streets and public right-of-ways just within the past year. One of the things that we have done in order to achieve that is bring our crews in-house or direct contract. Previously, we had been reliant on inmate labor, and so we are now working specifically with reentry programs and workforce development, and also bringing, as I said, our crews in-house. We have a new launching spot for RID patrol in inner Southeast Portland, and that allows them to be much more flexible in reaching every corner of the region. Previously, they started their days at St. John's landfill, way at the edge of the north part of the region. And so being more central has helped them get out in the region as well. In the garbage and recycling realm, we are also looking at rate review, particularly looking at how tonnage works at transfer stations and how that contributes to garbage rates across the region. And we are also doing some work on our facilities study which is about 1 year in the making, looking at what facilities are available, particularly contemplating recycling modernization, which passed at the legislative level. That's gonna unlock at least 40, I believe 48 depots across the region, focused on making hard to recycle items better able to get into the recycling stream, but how can we supplement that in the region so that not only are we working on recycling, but reducing waste overall, because that is our goal, to not landfill. Then I wanted to move on to the work that we're doing around the urban growth. And wanted to first thank you, Mayor, for stepping up to make sure that Clackamas is represented at the table. But we are putting together our process for this next urban growth management decision, which will be in 2024. It's our responsibility every 6 years to make sure that we plan for 20 years of growth. That's both housing and business lands. And we do that through an urban growth management report, which takes into account some of the factors that are required by state statute, like population growth and those trends. But we're also going to be very responsive to stakeholders. And we've launched the stakeholder roundtable. They've met twice. And it'll be our opportunity to also this fall and winter, listen to the youth through a youth cohort to make sure that we are hearing loud and clear what the region sees as our need going into this decision process. The cities and counties will also review a preliminary buildable land inventory to help understand where the buildable lands are at the urban edge. And then spring of 2024 is when cities that do abut the urban growth boundary will be asked to submit proposals if they do want to have a urban growth boundary expansion contemplated to include their city. We expect next summer to be the decision point for that process. So that'll be the convergence of the stakeholder roundtable as well as the voluntary city proposals. And then again, next summer is when the urban growth management report will be published, and Metro Council will make our decision regarding any urban growth boundary expansion. Our work on affordable housing has progressed well. We are on pace within our housing bond to exceed our construction goals. Our voter-approved affordable housing bond passed in 2018, and we've made incredible progress all across the region. In just 3 years, nearly 1,000 apartments have been opened across the region, and we here in District 2 have a number of apartments that are open, including Fuller Road Station, Tukwila Springs, Merrillhurst Commons, soon to open, and Good Shepherd having just opened last week. We have nearly 2,600 apartments in permitting or design, which will put us on track to exceed our goals. When we went out to the public asking for their support of the bond, we promised housing for 12,000 people, and we now expect this housing to house more than 14,000 people in the bond program. And as you can see in the bond map, we are touching every corner of the region. The green dots show projects that have opened, the dark blue dots are under construction, and the light blue dots are in permitting or design. So these projects represent basically the full capacity of the bond. So even though we haven't gotten those light blue dots all the way through the process, encapsulating the progress of those blue dots, we have fully spent out the bond, and we're contemplating how to further bring affordable housing to the region with continuing that pipeline. We have 7 housing authorities across the region, and they all deliver product a little bit differently, but the opportunity to not shut off the affordable housing infrastructure that we've helped build is really important to me. The other side of housing is not just the affordable units, but services to help people get housed and stay housed. The supportive housing services measure has been implemented by all 3 counties according to their local implementation plan. And in August, we received preliminary results from the 2nd year of the Regional Supportive Housing Services Program. Clackamas County has made progress in addressing homelessness in this part of our region. Part of that progress has been expanding an additional 140 shelter beds that are either brand new or we're going to close without this funding. And it's helped 643 people avoid eviction and homelessness. And it's placed 840 people into permanent housing with supportive services. So overall, region-wide, the measures helped over 5,000 people into housing and opened 1,400 shelter beds. The progress is never fast enough, and we're always looking for ways to improve the system while also working within the constraints of the measure, which give responsibility to each of the 3 counties to adopt their own local implementation plan. The regional transportation plan is at the conclusion after about 1.5 years of process. Our goal in passing a regional transportation plan is, number 1, to stay in compliance with the federal government, who needs to see an RTP in order to have federal funds come down to local projects. But we're also trying to plan for a transportation system that works on safety while cutting congestion and supporting clean air and environmental goals. The RTP is a blueprint that guides investments for all forms of travel. It includes projects focused on driving and walking and biking and transit. And we focus on the movement of goods as well as getting people around our region. Our vote is twofold. First, the JPAC votes and then Metro Council votes. Those 2 votes together constitute a vote of the MPO and the federalize. This Thursday morning is the JPAC vote, and then council will vote on the 30th. Those 2 votes need to be on the same package. So essentially, we can't take a vote from JPAC and then make an amendment at Metro Council without it going back to JPAC for concurrence vote, essentially. I will say that there is one amendment that I'm uncertain about the future, and that is the amendment proposed by Mayor Buck, representing the cities of Clackamas County, that would split the RMPP, the Regional Mobility Pricing Project, into 2, a planning phase and an implementation phase, and remove the implementation from the constrained list, essentially the list of program that we expect to be funded within the next 20 years. So that's the kind of hot topic going into Thursday's meeting. If you had asked me 1 year ago, I would have said it would have been the interstate bridge or Rose Quarter. It is not. That is the last kind of policy point standing in terms of debate at the table. And I'm all ears for your perspective as I'm thinking through the ramifications of that vote. Wanted to get to talk a little bit about the fun part. Oh, it's all fun. But those are really serious issues. And then I get to also spend a lot of time at the zoo, making sure that our region has a place that is fun, that families can gather, and that is part of our tourist ecosystem. The Oregon Zoo is contemplating an update to its master plan. And our community has long supported the Oregon Zoo and its mission to provide, as I said, family-friendly educational experience, but also the conservation value that it provides, particularly in the species survival plans. So thanks to supportive voters in the past, with the 2008 zoo bond, the zoo has 40% of the campus that have been updated and are cutting-edge AZA standards. And with the campus plan, our vision is to think through the next steps for the remaining parts of the zoo. So we've had extensive engagement with community, I believe over 1,300 individual touch points with zoo guests and staff and members of the community, technical experts as well, that have come up with a draft campus plan update. These improvements will support the zoo's essential wildlife conservation work, as well as the education and visitor experience. And then finally, far away from my district, but a passion project of mine is working with the Expo Center and our plan to Expo, it's called Expo Futures, thinking through a feasibility of a future expo that's built out to reflect the needs of the community. We are doing a feasibility study about if the facility could be built out to host more sport events. The idea being to take the type of events that we have, occasional volleyball tournaments. We had ESPN2 there filming a cornhole competition, but to have that help activate the space on a regular basis with youth and non-professional sports. Right now, if you're involved in youth leagues, you might travel to Spokane, but you're not traveling to Portland. And we would like to see that to help unlock that site being activated on a regular basis instead of just weekends. So that feasibility study is underway, and I'm excited about the possibilities both for community and also for frankly feasibility and sustainability of maintaining that venue. And with that, I think I'm pretty reachable, but that's my contact information, and I would love to talk more about what's on top of mind. I see a lot of you in various meetings, and some of us are assigned to the same committees, and just wanted to have an open conversation with whatever's on your mind.
Okay, we typically have a order we go in, but so I will start with Councilor Stanford, who also happens to be our rep to C4. So for some of the topics you brought up as being of interest.
Yeah, particularly the amendment. I don't know how much everyone was still firing at, whatever time that was, their last regular meeting, but I mentioned that in my report out. So thank you, first of all, for being here and for sharing all of this information. I think that the overall, question in my mind really is how cities can be, actively involved and in many ways supportive of, I'm thinking specifically with the housing bond and the SHS measure. I had a couple of questions just in terms of, with the affordable housing funding pretty much being allocated. And I'm also kind of thinking about, what the future of that might look like. If Metro were to consider, re-upping that or going out again for that, what sort of modifications do you think you would advise or things for cities to be looking for? Does that kind of make sense? So that's one question that I have. And then I wanted to talk just very briefly about the amendment for JPEG. And then I had a question about the Expo Center, but only 3.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, in order for cities to have a direct connection with the bond, cities would generally be a housing authority. So we have 7 housing authorities that receive the direct allocation from the bond. And here in Clackamas County, no city is big enough to have its own housing authority. So it all works through Clackamas County Housing Authority. That said, I do think all but one of my cities have sites for investment through this current bond. And I actually really embrace that kind of regional distribution. When we opened Good Shepherd last week, that was the first regulated affordable housing that city's ever had. A little too late, but a really good project. So I do think that in terms of how the city is active, it's through coordination with the county. In terms of supportive housing services, we have heard from the county that they are rolling out a city-specific program for cities to interact with SHS staff, potentially to have SHS funds support or co-locate or somehow be swimming in the same direction as city services that are serving the populations that are targeted in the measure. That's the chronically homeless population, where it's folks who've been on the street for 2 or more years and have a disability. And that's 3/4 of the funds have to be spent on that population, and then 1/4 of the funds can be spent at folks at risk of entering homelessness in a chronic sort of way. I've been a little disappointed based off of the conversation at C4, that program is rolling out slowly and with an aim towards cities hearing about it. It's only because of the Metro measure that Clackamas has this flexibility with their base funding. So I've advocated fairly loudly at C4 and directly with the county that the cities, those who have residents who are paying this tax and those who have businesses who are paying this tax, need to have the benefit of the cities, if not getting reimbursed, because I understand reimbursement can be a challenge, at least having co-located service or coordination, or we could even forego providing that service because we know that the county's person is there for it. Mayor Buck's been fairly vocal. You've been fairly vocal. So I do think C4 is having an impact on that, and I hope to see movement on that. Otherwise, I think it's something that our oversight committee may need to look into. In terms of a bond or a future housing measure, generally, I do think dependable funding, stable funding, that's potentially unlike this first bond, which was kind of a one and done that doesn't have a setup for a renewal. The long term is really important to me in terms of dependability and predictability. With 2.0, something I think that's going to be important is rolling NOFAs instead of 1 or 2 NOFAs.
Okay,
What-
now you're speaking.
Okay, yeah. So NOFA is,
It's 2.0 and what's
so the bond we have right now, I would call
Oh.
1.0.
okay.
If we go out for a future measure to support housing, one of the biggest lessons learned for me is that instead of just having 1 or 2 notices of funding availability, we should have them on a periodic basis. One of the cost drivers of capital A regulated affordable housing is how complicated it is to put together a finance stack. So we should be solutions oriented, and if you have most of your project underway, we should be ready to add value to that with a public dollar, instead of saying, no, you have to wait because we're not gonna put forward the funding notice until 8 months from now. Why make a project tread water waiting when we could do it quarterly? And then the other learning that we've had, the measure was very specific that our affordable housing investments were split between single units for singles, and then units designed for families with 2 or 3 bedrooms, while also being split for the 0 to 30% median family income, people with extremely low income, almost no income, and no income, and then those in the 30 to 60% band, which also definitely need our help, definitely need that housing assistance, but are just low income. And that 50-50 split works pretty well, but if we want to really leverage long-term supportive housing, we're gonna probably tilt more towards the 0 to 30s in order to really leverage permanent supportive housing, because people in PSH aren't gonna hit that 30 to 60. So those are the learnings that are top of mind for me. I would love to know what's on top of mind for you.
Yeah, one of the things that comes to mind for me is because Clackamas County has a housing authority that's embedded within county government, it makes it a little bit unique. But one of those unique byproducts is that there's a scattered site model for affordable housing. So while the bond has been bringing in larger complexes and multifamily or multi-unit living, the model that the housing authority has taken, maybe that's just based on availability, is that they've purchased individual single family houses, and those are available for folks as affordable housing across Clackamas County. So I'm wondering, based on what you've seen, as a, across all 3 counties. Do you think that's a model that's beneficial, especially for larger families? It's harder to find, you know, apartments that are affordable, that, you know, that will house larger families, but the house, you know, feasibly would have a little bit more space for them. So, I mean, are you, what are the learnings that you find from other counties, and are we on track with that model?
With the bond, we've been very focused on adding a new unit, not only in adding it to the affordable housing stock, but also literally adding a new unit. So the only like rehab project that we had was actually Tukwila down in Gladstone. Everything else has been new builds. I'm extremely supportive of rehab, particularly in the Tukwila kind of instance where it was, you go from 0 to something. But the single family acquisition strategy that you're describing is a very effective way to bring a unit over to affordable and regulated quickly, but it's not adding to our housing stock. It's not adding to the total number of units. And I think we need to do both, but I think the public dollar at Metro might be best prioritized for new unit overall.
Okay, that's helpful.
But I do think small scale is really important early on. The guidelines that Metro set, and before we walk them back, really prioritized. Wouldn't it be great if we could build 80, 90, 100 at a time? And I was like, hold on, that's basically saying you're never gonna build an LO. And if we're gonna have affordable housing in LO, it's probably because this bond unlocks some opportunity, and they're probably, their sites are gonna be scaled for 40 and 50, and we gotta prioritize that. So we walked it back, and smaller scale investments have been made.
Can I ask a clarification? You're saying the county now is buying more single family?
No, their model historically has been
Historically,
that they have single family households, and those are housing authority, like operated affordable housing.
Right. It was my impression that, I mean, yes, when I first got involved in Milwaukie and, when I was 10, 12 years ago, I knew that that was their model. It was my impression that they have tried to move away from that model, and have sort of sold off some of those houses over the years, and in the desire to go toward the model of what they're gonna do at Hillside and the similar project they had for Oregon City. Do you think that would change?
No, I don't think it's necessarily changed, but I do think that the model that they have taken, and the sheer number of single family houses that they have on, as assets through the housing authority, it's very different than what some of our neighboring counties do. And I'm just wondering if there's something, that could be beneficial, that could be learned from Clackamas County. And the thing that comes to mind for me is, if you have larger families, and like in my work, we've found that a lot of those are like newcomer immigrant families that might have a voucher, or might have something that doesn't quite cut it when they have to find an apartment that has the number of required bedrooms. And depending on your family structure, you might not even require that number of bedrooms, but that's set at a federal standard. So, I get, I think that there are families that have a hard time trying to find affordable housing. And when we look at the very large units that are being built across the region, I just don't know that those are deeply affordable. In that band of like 0 to 30 or even 30 to 60. But I'm just, I don't have the numbers to back it up. I'm just wondering if that seems to be something that you're noticing too. I want to recognize that other people probably have questions. Do you want me to ask these two?
Yes, go ahead.
So I just want to make sure, because at our last meeting, I reported out on the discussion from C4 and MPAC, and I want to make sure that we're on the same page, especially because you have a vote coming up. So my understanding with the amendment from Mayor Buck is that this would require ODOT to come back to MPAC and actually come back for regional conversation about any of the construction elements of their projects. And that it would require an amendment to the RTP in the process. So if that's the case, then my recommendation would not be to approve that amendment. I mean, I understand that the amendment may have been made because of some extreme frustrations with ODOT, but the process itself of coming back to regional conversation tables and then amending the RTP for each individual project seems extremely cumbersome, especially when, you know, we don't know exactly how many of those projects might be coming our
So it's only for one project, it's only for the RMPP, but point taken. So right as the,
So for people watching, RMPP.
yeah, I just recognized I was way in jargon. So currently there are 2 tolling projects. And a project is just a scope of work as defined at ODOT. One is the 205 tolling project, and that has been accelerated first in ODOT's work plans. So there's the 205 tolling project, and then a second tolling project called the Regional Mobility Pricing Project, RMPP for short. And that is a project that is designed to price the roads or toll the roads, specifically highways 205 and I-5 across the region. And it is more in development. There is no project or design yet to go under a federal review through NEPA, which is required before you begin. So there's the opportunity to still have an impact in that phasing for RMPP for the regional project, whereas the 205 project is already underway, so that's not considered in Mayor Buck's amendment. So the amendment is specifically saying, let's split the regional mobility pricing project, the tolling for the region, into 2 phases, leaving the planning in so that ODOT can continue to plan. And then in order to spend any dollars implementing, so flipping over to the side in which they're having to stand up gantries and buy the pricing equipment, that would require an RTP, Regional Transportation Plan vote, in order to bring that back into the list of approved projects.
And the years that this RTP covers is,
It's a 20-year time horizon, so everything on the constrained list, it's not prioritized, it's just assumed that those projects cost about the amount of money that a reasonable estimate has said that we will pay for in the next 20 years.
Yeah, I think that that's helpful. I thought that meant when we get to the point of discussing the construction phase of the RMPP, then each element of that would need approval. But what I'm hearing you say is that ODOT would come back to a regional conversation with an overall plan that has already gone through NEPA, the environmental assessment.
And regardless, the kind of project by project or very specific, we're gonna place a tolling gantry here and we're gonna place that there, that's an MTIP amendment that has to happen either way.
Okay, I see. So that I think that's helpful to know, and I understand why he introduced the amendment. I just also know that we've been bogged down in regional transportation plan conversations at all of those regional tables, and the conversation is largely the same. Because it's the same slide deck, the same presentation, you know, somewhat similar questions. But it's a really huge process just to have that discussion. So.
And is Mayor Buck's amendment, something that the C4 and the county signed off on? Or he went on his own?
I think that there were members of C4 that agreed with the direction that he was going to present. I don't know that the amendment was.
It was not vetted
Yeah.
at C4 ahead of time. And the staff who got appointed to represent the county at the technical table, all three of them were involved in the drafting. But tomorrow morning, the C4 Metro Subcommittee meeting will be the first meeting of a C4 or C4 subcommittee since that was introduced.
Yeah.
I think that's a good coordination flag.
Okay. All right, third question, last question, hopefully super easy. I just had a question about the Expo Center project and if Metro is coordinating with some of the regional levy conversations, the floodwater quality district, you're all involved in that. Because I would hate to see the Expo Center be redeveloped.
And then underwater.
And then, yeah, underwater. Yeah.
Yes, very good question. So Levy Ready Columbia and all of the work that they're doing, potentially referring a measure to harden our infrastructure along the river is something that Councilor Simpson is one of the leads on, and we are well in coordination. We're a significant payer and player in that levy district. So very much in coordination. The players at the table for our discussion represent community and also represent technical experts, including folks from Portland Parks and others who are neighbors.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. And really good flag.
Okay. Councilor Massey?
Thanks for coming by, Christine. Appreciate the update. My question concerns the overgrowth project, and you know, I think we would all agree that we have a housing inventory issue, and I'm talking about, you know, wider housing, not just affordable housing. And so my question is, you know, are we seeing any, pressure to expand the urban growth boundary to address some of those issues? And I readily admit this is a difficult issue about, you know, you want to maintain some density, you want to prevent urban sprawl, but at the same time, a lot of people would say, you know, you're running out of land for a house.
That's definitely the question that's being asked is, can we meet our housing needs with infill alone? Do we have the tools? You are one of, I think, 4 cities that doesn't touch the urban growth boundary. And so you understand this same struggle that Portland and Gladstone are in that you are still experiencing growth, but you're not touching it an UGB edge. Other cities, when they look at their growth pressures, they feel the same pressure you're feeling, but they look at a release valve just over the UGB. I think that Metro's commitment is to maintain the idea that we're trying to grow up and not out, while also recognize that the out years, we've assumed a level of growth in, frankly, Damascus that is no longer a city, that without that level of city planning and city readiness, we kind of have to walk back from the fact that there's going to be growth there and where should the growth be. We took advantage of the interim cycle, the 3-year mark, to actually look at River Terrace 2.0 and Tigard And that's where we did the land exchange in order to work within the confines of keeping the UGB the same in terms of size. But looked at a community that was doing the planning and that had the readiness, that was doing development for all levels of affordability, and didn't want to see River Terrace 2.0 sit on the shelf for an extra 3 years. Every extra year you're waiting and not planning and not getting it on the dirt is just making the housing more expensive. So I would look forward to ways that we're innovative like that again.
Yeah, that was just a shuffling of the existing square acreage or whatever you call it. One other question, and I'm sorry, this is I was stunned by the amount of garbage that was just left unattended. And what is the stuff? What is it?
It's everything from traditional bulky waste as defined by stuff that isn't construction related, that can't fit into a garbage can, to stuff that's remnants of tent camping and the house's population. The vast majority of the tonnage is from people who are housed. That's tonnage, so keep in mind that you may have more small incidents of lighter stuff. That's because of the household population, but the majority of that tonnage is things like furniture, household items, electronics, that just get left, some of it with the belief that one person's trash is another person's treasure. Well, no matter how beautiful your sofa is, after it's sat out in one rainstorm, it's no longer anybody's treasure. And that's really hard to recapture that as anything other than trash at that point. There are a few people in town who think that you can do some reuse, and I'm totally inspired by their dedication, but our RIG team just has to take it to the dump. So yeah, the inventory of what gets picked up across the region, it spans the gamut from household electronics to furniture to household goods. Not a lot of it is construction, but some of it is as well. Construction, I think they generally try and track down a little bit more its origin. Some of the household goods, you're never gonna find out where it came from. We contract with Multnomah County Sheriff to issue citations. If somebody does report, and along with their report of site, we ask, it's like 4 questions, but we ask, did you see somebody actually doing the dumping? If so, attach a picture or a description. And in those cases, that's when an investigation is opened, and there are penalties for that. But one of the big challenges is many cities don't have good bulky waste collection. Y'all with your summer pickups are one of the better cities. I mean, of 24 cities, there's like 4 that actually provide decent bulky waste. And the bulky waste is mostly focused at single family residential. A lot of apartments generate a whole lot of bulky waste that starts out by a dumpster and ends up in a street. So, yeah,
Thank you.
it's a quandary. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Council President? No other questions?
I'm just enjoying all this.
Thank you.
Well, I learned a lot. I did want to ask about the Expo Center. So looking for sports uses, is that because it's really underutilized now? And was it underutilized pre-COVID?
Pre-COVID, backing up, peek behind the curtain, Expo has long been unsustainable. We are firmly in the black on a year where Cirque du Soleil comes to town, and on a year where Cirque du Soleil does not come to town. We are really sometimes in the red, sometimes just barely in the black. Part of that is we took out a bond to replace a roof, and we're still repaying $1 million a year. And I think that payment is done at the end of this fiscal year. So we're going to be a little bit more in the clear, but we have no long-term plan for the capital improvements that those very old buildings are going to need. So we went out with a request for proposals over a year ago and said, how would you, the public, invest in this space? Potentially just a public investment, potentially a public-private. so that we could continue to offer a community gathering space, but that we would attract more revenue. We had 8 proposals and we had review of a technical committee, we had interviews, we had community input as well. One of the things that's most challenging is it's adjacent to Vanport. It's a site of a place of remembrance and learning since the internment of Japanese people. So we need to respect that the community needs community center to remember and learn from those atrocities of the government's past. But then we also need to make it useful for activating more than just, 3 days a week is kind of good for right now. And I'd like to see it more like the average 5-6 days a week of activation. So the proposals that we saw returned included a couple of larger developers who see it as really prime industrial, and it is, who wanted to do warehouse type things. We saw a proposal geared around hemp. We saw a proposal geared around reuse and repair of goods. And then we saw this proposal from a company that does sports investment nationwide. So we have not chosen to go with that particular investment, but we've chosen that as kind of our theme of inquiry to find out what's right. There's lots of people who are advocating for pickleball. There's lots of people who are advocating for a covered track. And I think that it's important that we build out a space that's a little bit more evergreen than pickleball. It's very trendy right now, but I think we really need to think on the long-term horizon, how's the community going to use this space? And how can we really activate this space to the service, both of the neighborhood, but also our regional tourism goal. We do want to help fill hotel beds. We do want to help bring people from Salem to Portland, to the region, to spend their money to stay here, whether it's for a boat show or for a sports event.
Interesting. Does the Metro operates the Moda Center, correct?
We do not. So we are owner and operator of Expo Center and Oregon Convention Center and owner operator of the zoo. Then we have an intergovernmental agreement for P5, the Performing Arts, downtown Portland, where the city owns those buildings and we operate them. But Moda is not us.
Moda and Coliseum, not. As I was wondering, I had seen some stuff about re-envisioning the Coliseum a few years ago, and I didn't know where all that.
I'm really glad I don't have to re-envision the Coliseum. There's some historical architecture there that I think is keeping it the way it is, but it's also pretty unusable for, yeah. Don't envy the city of Portland with that. Wondering.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I just make a quick comment? So that was awesome, thank you. I did want to let you know that the county actually got in touch with me on the 8th to open up a process around the around the houseless component of the funding coming out of the bond. Haven't gotten back to them. This is based on a request I've made around getting funding for a polling center at this site, as well as a warming center offsite at another location. They've been great partners to work with around that. So those are the only funds I've seen to date is for the houseless component of those funds, but I'm happy to ask about the housing dollars as well for affordable.
Well, and I was a little surprised by the remark that that they've been slow getting off with the supportive housing. Because I will say I've been at several meetings where they are like telling the mayors and telling the cities, come to us. We've got, come to us with your ideas. We'd like to help you fund them. So, I mean, if they're really, behind, it's not necessarily for lack of trying. Yes.
And I also realized I haven't given you an update on some of those things. It's just me. So I don't think of putting myself on the agenda in the same way. I'll do that for the December meeting, just to give you a sense for where we are. We're getting closer on the 23-hour stabilization center. So there's a number of projects that are just moved forward that will give you an update. Thanks.
Any last questions or comments for Councilor Lewis? Anything else you'd like to say to us?
No, just thank you for having me, and I look forward hopefully to coming back maybe in the spring, summer. There's lots of work between now and then, and look forward to working with you to make sure that Milwaukie is well represented, particularly urban growth boundary, but some of the next work on housing as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
On to community comment. We don't have, I assume Mr. Ashenbrenner is here for an agenda item. Are you here to make community comment other than that? Okay. Does Nicole have anybody on? I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. I didn't a moment ago.
Check and I just.
I'm not gonna bother reading the script if we don't have anybody.
We have a sponsor.
Yeah, nobody in the inbox.
Nobody in the inbox. Okay, then I will skip the, well, I guess,
Before you skip it,
before I skip it, this is part of the agenda during which council will hear community member comments regarding city business. Is there any follow-up from the November 7th community comments, Ms. Ober, or the November, or the October?
so Jen Gartley actually spoke 2 meetings ago. We had a couple of community members come in and talk about the new diverter that's on King and 42nd. And so I just wanted to provide an update. Jen did speak about this in her section later in the night, but we didn't come back and talk about it in the community comment section. We are looking at a roundabout. I think we're actually looking at a couple of roundabouts really close together along that stretch. This year is going to be a year of investigating how those could function. We don't have funds set aside for acquisition of property or right of way for the project. And so we've got to figure out what will fit within the structures we have, as well as not harm anybody's units or anything further. So I will know more. Jen's going to keep working on it. There will be a community conversation about what goes into that space. But people who are interested in making comments to her as she's going through that process should write directly to garbley@milwaukieoregon.gov. And she is available. Jennifer Garbley is, her email is on our website.
And she did touch base with the people who commented.
Correct. The second piece last week, Ann Burdick came in and spoke about concerns she had about things that Justin and I said regarding natural gas. And she and I disagree. So you all are going to continue to have conversations about things like whether or not the city can set 2 different right-of-way fees for different utilities, and whether or not cities are typically the provider of health-related ordinances and enforcement. So those are ongoing conversations that the city is going to have, but I appreciate her input and we'll continue to talk.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And in the absence of anybody popping up online, we will skip the rest of the community comments. We have no consent agenda. So that brings us to the event vendor and business registration update from our director.
Like that, and now it should be.
Okay.
It should.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Toby France, Finance Director, here to talk to you about an ongoing process you've heard about a couple of times over the course of last year regarding business registration and vendors at city events. So tonight we will. So tonight we'll give you a brief background on what has occurred before this evening. Give you the proposal that's been developed by staff working with community members, and get guidance from council on next steps. So there's actually a very extensive outline of what's happened over the last several months on this subject in your staff report that's attached. So I'm going to just summarize what has occurred. So this spring, the question arose about whether or not vendors at city events, city permitted events, needed a business license, and went to code, and code seemed to indicate that they did. Look to see if there was some places in code that maybe we could work around, and was informed by city attorney, know that there is not. So the city manager, however, is able to waive fees in our consolidated fees and charges ordinance, and did do that for the farmers market and First Friday vendors. However, we did ask for vendors to register with the city at zero cost. We then took and we met with city council, and city council directed city staff, I was one of the city staff, to meet with the stakeholders and working with stakeholders to prepare a recommendation. So we did that on August 29th. We had representatives from First Friday, Mr. Ashenbrenner was there from Celebrate Milwaukie Farmers Market. We also had Mark Sten from Celebrate Milwaukie Farmers Market, and representative from North Clackamas Chamber of Commerce. And we met with those representatives, discussed barriers faced by the event organizers, as well as objectives of the city within the business code. In working with them, we were able to develop a proposed path. And so that proposed path forward is to, first off, in a very limited manner, amend the municipal code to provide an exemption to vendors who are at a city permitted event and having to obtain a business license. Additionally, we would be updating our temporary event permitting process. And in that process, we, if applicants indicated that there were going to be vendors at their event, we would ask them for a list of those vendors. And the rationale behind that is so that the city, if something was to happen, would know who is conducting business within the city on that day, and so we have that information. No fee would be charged to the vendors, so the temporary event permit is a free permit, and there would be no need to get a business license. So next steps, if council supports this general direction, staff will prepare a code amendment. We are already tentatively on the council agenda for January 16th to do so, and we would be updating the temporary event permit process, and this would allow us to get this all put in place before next season's farmers market First Friday events. And with that, any questions?
Questions, Councilor Senator?
One question just about the business license in general. Is there a mechanism to either reduce or reassess the fee for business license if there's a hardship, financial hardship? I'm thinking about like those that have very low income, or if maybe they're within a certain population like youth, or things kind of along those lines. Do we have anything like that so far?
There are some exemptions. Not-for-profits are exempt, and in terms of some specific types of businesses that you mentioned. Off the top of my head, there is not an exemption for those. I'd be happy to follow up and ensure that. We did talk about when doing this review, were there other pieces of the business license code we would want to update, and decided that what we really wanted to do is focus on this issue. And so we focused on what we could do to make sure that before we get into the next season, we're able to address the concerns of the farmers market and First Friday.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna add, I have received requests, not maybe a couple of times, from businesses who are such a small dollar. And it's gonna be a struggle to cover and provide a waiver. So I can waive up to $1,000, I believe, without speaking with counsel. So I have in a couple of instances. We don't put that out on the website. So if that is of interest in the future, we would wanna have, we could either do it with a formal change in the ordinance or a discussion about language you all would like to see placed on the website. Both of them.
Thank you. Sure. I would be interested in exploring that. I think that when we're looking at cities like Milwaukie, where we're growing and we're expanding, and housing is becoming even more expensive, it's actually an anti-displacement strategy that we can connect with economic development to be able to provide that. So I guess along those lines, I'm wondering if we go back and look at our business registration and we have an idea of diversity within the ownership of those businesses, and if we can bring that into the conversation too.
So during COVID, we actually contacted a lot of our businesses that had pulled business registration because we were giving them grants. We also were able, in that application process, people self-selected whether or not they were an organization of color or whether or not they were had employees. There was a bunch of self-selecting information they also provided us to qualify for the grants. So we have more than we would have if we hadn't gone through that process. I think there's a couple of things. One is we would want to do a pretty substantial engagement process if we're going to be changing who pays at what point. And that's a lot of businesses. Some of those I think, do we have email addresses for all of them or just some?
Most of them.
So it's something that we could do by email without having to do a public flyer or mailer or something, which reduces the cost, but it is going to be public. So I just want to be transparent that will take time. What I'd like to also recommend, if you're comfortable with it, is for the comfort of the fabulous humans who have gone through this process with us to date for this specific issue, I'd like to proceed. And then if we want to continue a conversation, which I'm generally seeing 2 head nods, but I need 3 tonight, about bringing this back for additional conversations about the rate structure, we could do that at a future date.
I mean, I guess I feel like if the rate at 175 is not so onerous. And I mean, there was actually a move by the city council some years ago to raise the rate, right? To try and create a business tax out of it.
Well, that's an option we're going to talk about tonight. So all of these things are playing into how you all generate revenue. Which is why it may be easier to deal with these on a case-by-case basis, where we send an email out to our small business owners who say they don't have voice, and talk about it more from a perspective of an annual email that I send, instead of a process by which we continuously exempt. Does that make sense? So I think there's mechanisms here that don't have to be. We've had a program now for offsetting utility payments for a long time. Granted, over the last 3 years, we've used it a lot, and in the past, we didn't use it as much. Our traditional program, we still don't use that much. So I think there's going to be interest, but there's a lot of shame and other things that go into whether or not somebody's going to participate in a program like that. So I just want to be honest about that and make sure we have a structure that'll lead to what you're looking for. Thank you.
Councilor Massey,
No questions.
Council President Nicodemus.
No, I'm just wondering, did a lot of this affect folks that were doing city sponsored events? Or city permitted events, sorry, not city sponsored.
So there, we estimate that between the farmer's market and First Friday, there's probably about 100 vendors. So that is, you know, a significant number. And so by doing the process that we worked out, that would you know, make things easier for those vendors.
I mean, I'm surprised the number isn't larger than that, because I mean, the farmer's market probably had enough to do during the course of the year alone. But because they have some that are certain parts of the season and not all season long and stuff, yeah. But what about the I mean, we have other city permit events, right? We have Juneteenth or other things. So this same rule applies to anything that's going on in our parks, basically.
If they pulled a permit.
If they,
So in some cases, we don't pull a permit, in parks specifically, depending on what's going on, if it's something that CPRD is doing, depending on who the vendor is. It doesn't happen 100%. But if we are permitting it, then we will ask for the communication tools to be able to get in touch with people so that if there's a problem after the event or during the event, we're able to communicate.
so the same concern about wanting to be able to, you know, have emergency contact information or be able to contact people if there's some emergency. I guess what I'm wondering about is events that have vendors that are not city permitted, like church bazaars and school bazaars and craft fairs.
We just don't have a mechanism. We don't even know they're often happening. It's really hard and complicated for us to try and insert into those events. Should people be pulling a permit or not a permit, a business registration? Yeah. If I don't know what's happening and I don't have Tim working, and I mean, the problem right now is that these events we definitely know are happening. We usually have staff that we're usually involved with. I just can't guarantee I can get information.
You didn't fill out yellow comment cards, so I take it you don't want to comment?
Actually just had my question answered, so I don't know that we really need to comment.
Well, if you wanna comment, we'll have you come up to the table.
Yeah, I just a couple.
We can actually hear him about the same. Sure.
And you can fill out the yellow card after.
And I'm on my way to work. Dave Ashenbrenner with Celebrate Milwaukie, and I'm actually the business manager for the market. Mark and Emma and Toby have been working real well on this project, and we understand the direction it's going, and we can live with that. We've always mentioned to them that the quickest way to get a hold of these people is through us, because we have all that information all the time. But we're happy to share our list with the city under the premises that it's not going to be used for anything else or sold or anything like that. So that's a good thing. And I just was mentioning to Ed, we want to make sure we get a chance to look at the policy before it comes back to you to see if there's anything that jumps out at us as being not what we agreed to or not what we talked about. So other than that, a lot of our vendors are small businesses, single owner businesses. A lot of the farmers all have other requirements that they have to meet statewide. The food vendors have to have food handlers permits and health authority permits and stuff like that. So there's a lot of regulation that goes on within the farmers market that doesn't necessarily always show up. But we're happy with the direction this is going. Yeah, sort of. Just nod.
I like what Lisa was asking about, because there are many other events that you do know, solstice event, the
Solstice event would count.
what
Solstice event, they would have to file. It's the same.
vendors, Juneteenth, music and parks, all these things, there's many things that, as long as it's very equitable. Safe said, these are all small farmers who pay many fees to have organic produce to pay, drive a heavy truck into, being a city providing great service and sustainable service that's by helping these people. And at any time it becomes a burden, that would be tough for our small family farms that are here in many Platte County.
I would, yes, I'll just go ahead, we will be requiring it for our events, for events that we permit. So, all the ones you listed, I believe we are a part of the city procurement process. I'm not, the only one I'm not positive on, but I think we are doing is the music in the parks. I believe we do. But everything else you listed would be.
They've only started really having vendors the last few years. They didn't usually have vendors at those music events, but they have added food and some vendors. Okay. Any other questions or comments for staff? Everyone's happy with the direction it's going?
So direction to come back January 16th. And we will make sure that we loop back with the people we've been working with prior to that meeting, so they have a chance to see what we're changing in code and what the form would look like. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you to those community partners for being actively involved in helping to figure this out.
Providing beautiful space in downtown Milwaukee for 25 years. Love that space and love growing into it, filling it up.
And real quickly, we should mention our final market, November.
We did announce it.
You did announce it, okay, just want to make sure it gets in,
Yeah.
because in the full market, we filled up everything. It's
Oh, great.
Yeah. gonna be a really good market. I was driving.
We did announce it, and we announced your generosity in sponsoring the downtown pancake contest.
Happy to do it.
Okay, so we will move on to the next agenda item, which is fee and tax training. Look at that, we're ahead of schedule. And Counselor Savage-Ord has noted at the beginning that she may have to leave in the middle of this one.
Sounds like a challenge. We need to beat her out.
Let's do it.
Pardon?
So it sounds like a challenge. We need to beat her out.
I don't know, this is a big topic.
Okay, are we ready, Mayor Beatty?
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So again, Toby LaFrance, Finance Director, and I'm very excited to be here this evening for this subject. We met last night as members of the Budget Committee, and among the discussions we had there was the financial forecast and the direction that we're heading in the budget. And as Ann Ober discussed, we have a plan. Part of that plan to balance the budget, and part of that plan involves working with the Budget Committee and Council on the revenues of the city of Milwaukee. We need to look for ways to enhance our existing revenues, potentially find some additional revenues that will help us balance the budget for years to come. So this is, and as Mayor Beatty said, at the end of that meeting, we're meeting tonight to start that process. So excited to have to be here and have that discussion. All right, so give you a brief overview. We're going to be talking about our current state of several of our revenues, and then for those revenue classifications, some places where we have some opportunities. So I want to start with kind of some background. Where are we as the city? So primary revenues on, as you're looking at it, I want to make sure that works out sync. It does. Okay, on the left are all the city revenues that are over $1 million. We only have 9 of them. And we have within our general fund, only about a dozen revenues that are over $200,000. So, and in both cases, these represent about half the revenues. So those 9 revenues that are over $1 million is about half of the total revenues of the city. And this doesn't in the general fund combined represent about half of the general fund revenues. So what that means is that we have a lot of other smaller revenues that make up the difference.
So on your, oh, sorry, I'll hold my question.
Okay. So I'm gonna start out with some information on property taxes. And property taxes in and of itself could take up more than this entire meeting. And so I'll try and keep it as much as I can at a high level. Back in the 90s, measures 5 and 50 set our current system in place. And at that time, City of Milwaukie had a permanent tax rate. What happens is take that tax rate, you apply it to an assessed value for a property, and that is the property tax that property pays. And at the time that was done, Milwaukee's permanent tax rate was set at just over $6.50 per thousand of assessed value on a property. Further, those measures said assessed value can grow by no more than 3% per year. Even if real market value is skyrocketing, assessed value can only go up by 3% per year. The result is currently within Clackamas County, assessed value is roughly 50% of real market value of the properties within the county in total. Then in 2005, City of Milwaukie had a local measure 166, which dedicated about $2.40 from that $6.50 to the fire district, and said the City of Milwaukee is no longer providing fire services. We are annexed into the fire district, and we are going to, the fire district's permanent levy rate was this $2.40. And so they will now tax that rate, and so that the taxpayer, they see no overall change or increase. We reduced the city's rate down to $4.13 per thousand. So if you add the $4.13 to the $2.40, it adds up to that $6.53.79 per thousand. So permanent rate stayed intact, just got split. So with that history, and so that's where we are today, is we have our permanent rate has been split. We are still continuing to assess the $4.13 per thousand. Fire district has the $2.40 per thousand as part of their rate and providing fire services within the city. What are some of the additional tools that are available to the City of Milwaukie? So City of Milwaukie, like any city within the state, is able to go to the voters and ask for a local option operating levy. So it requires a vote to establish it, and it requires a vote to renew it every 5 years. Additionally, because we've got that gap, that $2.40 that's now going to the fire district, and that was voter approved. So as our own voters that approved it, we can go to our own voters and say, we want to assess more than the $4.13 per thousand. And we can do that. We can ask them for that. And we wouldn't have to go back every 5 years. We can do that up to our permanent tax rate. We would not be able to exceed the permanent tax rate. That's in state law. But going to our own voters, we can go over our existing rate, $4.13, up to that permanent rate. One thing to note, anytime that a city is going to be funding something through property taxes, then our operating costs grow by 4 to 5% annually. Property taxes are going to grow by 3.5% annually. So it will not keep up with the cost of providing those services. And then as an organization, as a city, you need to go back to the voters if you want to maintain a certain service level. with that property tax levy. So it's, that's, that going back to the voters is built in automatically with the local option levy. If the city of Milwaukie was to look at doing sort of increasing our rate up to the permanent rate, we would still likely need to go back periodically. It just wouldn't be required every 5 years. I want to give a little bit of definition between an operating levy, which is something we were just talking about. So that would be something that would help us pay for library services, police services, other operations of the city of Milwaukie, and bonds. So there's a couple of different types of bonds cities can issue, and bonds are to pay for typically capital projects, something physical. So it's not the operations, but it's the physical place where those operations are taking place, where services are provided to our community. A general obligation bond, so something like the light rail refinance or the library facility we are in this evening, those were paid for with general obligation bonds. And that's where we went to the community, said, we want you to help us pay for this facility. You're going to pay for it through property taxes. So it's going to be a property tax levy on top of the amount that we charge for our operations. There's other types of bonds a city can utilize, and the city of Milwaukie has. So there's what's generally called a full faith and credit bond. That's where you council make the decision that we are going to issue bonds. We will have a plan as to what type of revenues are going to be repaying this. So examples of this would include our 2018 and 2022 transportation bonds being paid for by our various transportation revenue sources. However, we are backing that bond with full faith and credit of the city of Milwaukie. So that means if those revenue sources, for whatever reason, become insufficient, then we will go to other revenue sources to repay that bond, even if that means that we have to go to our property tax revenue and cut our operational services to do it. That's the promise you're making by saying full faith and credit. Now, you do this with a high level of confidence that that's never going to happen. The revenues will be sufficient. However, that is ultimately what a full faith and credit means. Then there's a revenue bond. Revenue bond is where you are saying that we will have this facility, we're going to pay for it with dedicated revenues that we will dedicate to that repayment. However, you're not dedicating the full faith and credit of the city of Milwaukie. Because while the city of Milwaukie doesn't have that today, examples where that's typically happens is with utilities. So if you're doing major water, for instance, water facilities, you could do a water revenue bond and dedicate a certain level of water revenues to repayment. And also an urban renewal, doing an urban renewal dedicated bond, not full faith and credit, but you're dedicating the urban renewal revenues is another commonplace, as urban renewal essentially is property tax. It's a very viable and dependable source. So people will be willing to lend urban renewal bonds where it's a revenue bond. So lastly, on the property taxes, just want to give you some sense of where Milwaukie is relative to other cities within Clackamas County. And it's hard to see that it's in bold, but Milwaukee's in bold and it's about in the middle. And this is sorted by total tax rate. So on the far right-hand column. And what we have in here is for each of the cities, what's the permanent rate? So that's the rate that was set by measures 5 and 50. So there you can see our $6.53.79 per thousand. What is the rate we are charging? So not every city is at that maximum, is at that permanent rate. And so you can see City of Milwaukie are $4.13.67 per thousand. Then whether or not there's a local option levy that's being done on top of that, or if there's a bond that's being done on top of that. So you add the rate charged, the local option rate, and the bond rate together to get to that total column. And yes,
Would the library bond be on?
the library bond should be on there. I'm not sure why it's not. So,
Okay.
yeah,
We'll get you the updated.
yeah, we'll get you that updated. And thank you for catching
Well, I was
that.
just
Yeah.
curious.
Library and Metro.
Yes, so we do have a small amount. Anyways, I won't say what it is. That should be on there. And I want to touch on a couple of the cities that aren't at that permanent rate. So in each case, what they've done is they have dedicated some amount elsewhere. So in the city of Lake Oswego, they have a section for inside the Lake Oswego School District and outside the Lake Oswego School District. And actually the permanent rates for those two were set with measure 5 and 50, and they are different due to the mechanisms of measures 5 and 50. What Lake Oswego did a long time ago, over 15 years ago, is they started dedicating a certain amount of their permanent rate to the schools to help supplement the school funding. At this point, it's all of 6.5 cents per thousand. They're still helping out the schools. So that's the difference. Oregon City, at the same time that City of Milwaukie annexed into the fire district, Oregon City did as well. However, they structured theirs differently than Milwaukie did, where Milwaukie said, we're doing a clean split, no increase in property taxes to our property owners, our constituency. City of Oregon City said that yes, $2.40 will go to the fire district. However, we're only going to cut our rate by about 90 cents per thousand. We've got a 5-year plan as to how we're going to use the additional roughly $1.50 that they were going to get. And then they could, if needed, continue to increase their rate charge by no more than 3% per year up to the permanent rate. So they protected their ability to go between the reduction and the permanent rate, and that's something that they've been doing.
So just to clarify, they set that up at that time, and so they can at any point go up by the 3% without going back to the voters?
Correct, because the initial voter approved measure allows them to do that. So they have a resolution they passed, resolution 05-04, if you want to go into Oregon City's resolutions, and which set up the structure by which the measure would be implemented. And it outlines an extensive financial plan. They had to stick with that plan for 5 years before they could consider any increases, and then any increases in their rate, they can only increase by that 3% on the rate. So that'd be on top of the 3% that assessed value could go up. So those are some of the key things there. Have information on the local option levies that different places have done. Predominantly, they are public safety and parks. With that, actually, I do want to pause for just a moment because we're going to leave the property tax levy, property tax information, and just see if there's any questions about this part before we advance through the rest of the presentation.
Any questions?
Yeah, I've got one. So, can you sort of describe how the county does the change the assessments?
Sure. To a certain level, they do have assessors that go out, and really what the assessors are doing is checking in on the real market value. Because since real market value is so much higher than assessed value at this point in time, the assessed value essentially is just going up 3% because it can.
Is that what we see?
And that's
sort of a blanket 3% bump.
It is. Where that comes into play is when you get into new construction. And this is where things start getting complicated fast. And however, that ratio where I said real market value and assessed value is about half of real market value countywide. They do break it in further by property type, but then they use that ratio. So if you build a $500,000 home, the assessed value is gonna be $250,000.
Okay, one other follow-up. So if any of those cities whose permanent rate was below the max, you know, like ours was, they decided to move up, those are not constrained by the 3% ceiling.
Right, so 3% is on by state value is an assessed value.
Yep.
In this case of Lake Oswego, it would mean that they're giving less to the schools and they're keeping it for the city. So they're still, in total, their permanent rate is being charged to their property tax payers. It's just who gets it, the school district or the city.
Councilmember, I would also add that compression is a thing we're not gonna get into tonight. But there's a training that we did, I believe, for budget committee several years ago. I can go back and try and track it down. That talks about, from the state perspective, how all these things come into play, but basically an entire household can only pay so much in comparison to its neighbors. There's a whole calculation that goes into it, but sometimes it means that our rate does not fully collect what we say we're collecting. So it's a different discussion. I'd like to send you all the information. I am not an expert on it by any means, but it would take only.
And I can tell you, for the city of Milwaukee, it's such a minor impact that it's not, we've already spent more time talking about compression than we need to based on the impact of compression.
Thank you.
Okay.
But yeah, I should say, okay.
So the library bond is not included here, but if it were, which column would it?
It would go into the bond rate other.
Okay, great. And then I think you had mentioned Metro. Would that also go into that area, or is that?
This is only cities.
Okay.
No, but we have a bond for paying our share of the orange line, right?
Correct.
We have a $5 million.
We have 2 GO bonds. One is that, the other one is this library.
So the combination of the two of those will go into that column. Okay, thank you.
So there was something about Commissioner Ramsey's question that. Oh, yes. The fact that, and I have brought this up at a few different LOC and Oregon Mayor's Association meetings, and I haven't ever gotten what I felt was a definitive answer, but the fact that that new construction is still being put an assessed value that's only 50% of the real market value is, as I understand it, not dictated by measures 5 and 50. It's a practice of the county assessors, and it actually would be changed.
That would be nice. I haven't heard that, though. I wouldn't, I'd be happy to read more about that and learn more about that aspect.
I mean, it drove me crazy when I heard that, because when we start seeing these big developments like Cherry Farms, high dollar houses, I was like, okay, here comes the tax revenue, and then to find out that they are billed at half of what they're worth, drove me crazy. But anyway.
Any other questions on property tax before we move on? Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm gonna get a little bit of background briefly on some of the other revenue sources of the city. State revenues, this is up at the top of this graph that goes, you can see that we get slightly more than $1 million in state gas tax. So this is an important transportation funding source. Less so when it comes to things like liquor tax, the state revenue sharing, which is more liquor tax and marijuana, other state revenue, which is code for marijuana, and the cigarette tax. Those are all general fund revenues, and generally about $400,000 or less. Right-of-way revenues. This is an important revenue source for both general fund and transportation. On the graph, the transportation right-of-way fees are in orange, the general funds are in blue. Essentially, this is a fee that utilities pay to use the city's right-of-way or our streets. As it is the most efficient way for those utilities to provide the services to their customers. We are charging currently 8% on our own utilities, water, sewer, stormwater, and 5% on all other utilities, and that percent is the percent of their revenues. So for the general fund, this is nearly $2.5 million worth of revenue. Of transportation funds, it's about $1.5 million worth of revenue. So this is an important place for revenue. It's a significant one.
5% on all other, I thought it was 7% on telecoms.
No, in the master fees and charges, I can pull it up if we need to. My review was that it was 5%. So fees and charges. Here you can see the scale on this graph. The top far end is $400,000. So these are things that are set by council. These are general fund only fees and charges that were over $10,000. And so there's not a lot of them. The highest one is what we were just talking about, which is our business registration fee. And we do have things like planning, engineering, alarm permit fees. They appear to be low. If you looked at our community development application fee, that is in 2023, that was right around $50,000. You know how much work is being done by planning commission and staff to do all of that work. $50,000 doesn't even pay for half of a plan. So these do appear to be low. So I'm now going to transition into some of our revenue opportunities. And I'm going to kind of pick these off one by one. So we already talked about property taxes a bit. We do have the opportunity to go to the voters. We can go for a 5-year local option levy. We can also use the capacity we have between the rate we're charging and the permanent rate set by the state. Generally, an operating levy pays for an additional service. Meaning by that is part of the discussion we had at budget committee last night was that we need to look for additional revenues and hopefully additional revenues in excess of the services we're adding, because we're falling behind on our existing services and our ability to pay for those. So while operating levies are great if we want to do a major expansion of a service, basically you're going to get a 1-for-1 additional revenue for the cost of the service. And as we discussed earlier, property taxes are going to grow slower than the cost of that service, so an adjustment of the rate will be needed periodically. Right-of-way fees. So again, these are the fees set on our utilities. And as I said, current charges of 8% to 5%. As an example, City of Gresham is being more aggressive on these fees. They are charging 10% to gas, electric, and their own water, sewer, and storm utilities, 7% on telecommunications, and 5% to others. They have within their city fees and charges schedule, they have dedicated a portion of revenues over a certain amount to different street light and transportation programs. And if the city was to look at this as a potential place where we're interested in increasing our revenues, here a small percentage change could make a significant difference because these are significant revenues of the city. We would want to make sure we're doing this in close context or contact with the city attorney, making sure that we're doing it the right way to minimize any legal pushback from utilities. Two potential places where the city does not have code in place currently. So transient lodging tax and the transportation network companies. So for the transient lodging tax, this is a fee that hotels, motels, or short-term rentals, so your VRBOs, your Airbnbs, pay to the city. And currently the city does not have any commercial hotel motel, so there is a handful of short-term rentals within the city. We do have code that permits that. With this revenue source, if you 70% of the revenues need to go to promote tourism or tourism facilities, and 30% is unrestricted. And I can share that City of West Lynn recently went through this process. They are going to be charging a 6% fee. They also, according to the finance director there, they don't have a commercial hotel motel. So this is just on the short-term rentals within their city. It's not going to be a huge revenue source. They're only predicting about $9,000-$10,000 a year to start, and they are contracting with the state to administer the collection of revenues on their program. Transportation.
The county is also in the process of, or has just adopted.
Okay, that's
Unincorporated.
thank you. And transportation network companies. This is essentially a fee per ride on services like Uber and Lyft. This is something that's done in the city of Portland and a handful of suburban cities around the city of Portland, as well as I believe city of Ashland. And at City of Portland, they're charging 50 cents per ride. And I talked with the finance director with City of Tigard, which is one of the places that has also implemented the fee. They have an IGA with PBOT, so Portland, to administer the collection of the fees. And they are actually, City of Tigard is estimating about $100,000 a year of revenue coming from this charge. So smaller fees. So this is where earlier I was talking about things like the planning fees we collect, the engineering fees we collect. Many of these fees are not covering the cost of service, or even frankly coming close. There's still a lot of room between what it costs to provide the services for which people are paying fees and the fees that they are paying. I would say that individually, if council was to instruct me to go and look at the planning fees of the city, in and of itself, we could do an awful lot of work and not collect a heck of a lot more revenue to help our general fund. If council was to say, let's take a look at these as a package, do a high level analysis and see if making significant changes on a number of smaller fees is something that council would be willing to do and see the revenue impact of that for general fund, that would be, I think, a good use of staff time. So we're now at the questions portion of the training, and I'm happy to be here to collect your questions. If I don't have the answer, I'll be happy to get you those answers.
We'll let Counselor Savage go first. She wants to go.
2 questions so far. The slide that you had about revenue streams, specifically that let's see. Yep.
Oh, fees and charges?
That one.
This one, right away fees. Okay.
So with regard to the right-of-way revenues, if we were to increase any of those fees, like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are those already tied to existing programs that we have, services that we offer within the city? And would an increase to that to that revenue stream pass through directly to that service.
Okay, so with our right-of-way fees, the ones that are in orange there are going to our various transportation funds. So, and essentially that is our own utilities, water, stormwater, sewer, plus, what's called the, privilege tax, which is a portion of the PGE. And so PGE is split into two pieces, part goes to general fund, part goes to transportation. And so while we haven't in code dedicated them to specific transportation projects, we have issued debt that we're planning to pay for with transportation revenues, mostly with our SAFE program and our other transportation fees. And but also we have our road crew and other capital projects that we'd be paying for with transportation funding. So if we were to increase, for instance, our water right-of-way charge from 8 to 10%, we could say that we're still doing 8% to transportation and the additional 2% elsewhere. It would probably mean that we need to change something in municipal code. However, it's something that council could direct to do.
Okay, that's helpful. My second question has to do with property tax data and how directly we can access that. So if we're interested in doing some modeling based on some of the proposed changes that we're looking at, do we have access to those data directly, or do we have to put together a question and send it to the county and then they pull a query and they send us a spreadsheet?
For the individual property information set, yeah, so in the past, what I have done is to do a request and they can provide a query for the entirety. If we had specific individual properties, we could probably do something faster. However, it's not something that I'm aware of that Clackamas County provides to me to just say, okay, what's that information? It's possible within GIS and the many layers in GIS that assessed value might be in there, but I need to go in and dive in.
Okay, so how involved is it to request all property tax data for the city of Milwaukie?
Requesting it is not that involved. For the assessor's office to pull it together can be pretty involved, and right now is a very busy time for them.
Sure.
However, it's something that if we have sort of project we're trying to work on to figure out what the impact of something would be, that would be one of the steps. One of the first steps we want to take is to once we do sort of the high level, what the additional revenue from a change, we would want to get that information. It would help us also know things like what's the median assessed value of a home within the city. We can get that updated. We can get a lot of information there that'd be useful.
Okay, that's helpful. I think for this longer term conversation about revenue, it would be helpful to have data that we could do kind of our own crunching around. But the item that, and it's kind of ironic that I'll bring this up tonight, but I do want to just let my colleagues know what I'm getting at, is I'm interested to know how many manufactured homes reside, like manufactured or mobile homes reside within the city of Milwaukie, and what contribution to our general fund they pay in their property taxes. And the reason that I want to know that is because I would like to approach the county to get permission to adjust that property rate for mobile and manufactured homes. We're the only county in the tri-county area that doesn't have permission to do that. And right now,
I'm sorry, you're saying to set a lower rate for those?
for, yeah, Because I mean, that's really like, and then that's why I said it was ironic, because we're talking about increasing fees and revenue, but I think that, you know, if we're really looking at this with a lens for our most vulnerable neighbors, those that are living in mobile homes and manufactured homes are right on the edge of being pushed out of Milwaukie. So it's something that I want to look into, and I realize that we need that data from the county. So then I would just wanted to publicly bring that up.
And is that looking at only where they own their parcel, or it's looking at the owner of a park?
It's when they own
Their own,
yes, yeah, the property tax.
So not a,
Sorry,
not a rental,
Um,
but an owned property with an owned manufactured home on it.
yeah. So, and I don't want to distract too much further, but I want it to be, because it is potentially a policy area that I would like to talk to council about, so. I just wanted to air it here.
Before we move on to the next question, I do need to apologize to Mayor Beatty and the council. Mayor Beatty, you were correct. I looked up in the master fees and charges during this discussion, and communications, other than small cell wireless, are at 7% of gross revenues. So sorry about that. I got an answer there.
I thought that came up in yesterday or something. Do you have other questions? That's it. Thank you. Councilor Ratsey?
I still don't understand a privilege tax. Why isn't it just part of the other franchise fee?
I know with PGE, it's written in state law or administrative rules that when you go over 3.5%, the amount between 3.5% and the 5% we charge needs to be called a privilege tax, and they can show it on the utility bill as City of Milwaukie privilege tax. And so that's something that when I was at a former employer and we went above the 3.5% that we dealt with PGE, and they still they still said no, it's privilege tax to show up on the bill. And that's what it's called.
Okay, I'll press the I believe button. I don't know what the privilege is, but at any rate, go to the next slide.
Absolutely.
Next slide. Sorry. Next slide again, sorry.
No worries.
Okay, so first bullet, Milwaukie County voters for a 5-year local option levy are to use the capacity between the rate charged and permanent rate. So that also requires a vote?
Yes, because Milwaukie voters set aside that $2.40 to go to the fire district, and the language of Milwaukee's measure basically said, and this is the new rate. Milwaukee's going to charge this, fire district gets that, and there's no increase to Milwaukie property taxpayers.
Okay. So the second bullet says generally operating levies pay for additional services. So the first question is generally, so it's not absolute, is that what I'm hearing? And so you have to tie the rate increase to additional services.
You have to state what the levy is going to be used for.
Okay.
Generally, levies that pass voter approval they're going to get something more for the additional property tax they're going to pay.
So does that mean that they cannot be used for a gap due to inflation?
They can be.
They can,
As long as that's part of the statement of the voter measure.
okay. I don't get that out of that bullet because it says additional services.
That's where the qualifier generally. So
Okay,
so we can go to voters and explain the increase that some or all of that increase is gonna pay for, essentially avoid cuts.
Okay, so there is flexibility.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So on this, the first bullet,
Yes.
that's the one where if it passed, then it doesn't have to have another vote again.
The second part of that sentence, so that the capacity between the rate charged and our permanent rate. And I think that's actually best shown when we go back to this table. We can go to the voters, we could increase our rate charged. We could go to them and say, we are currently by city of Milwaukie measure, voter passed, only able to charge $4.13 per thousand. By state law, we can charge up to $6.53 per thousand. We want to charge more. It's not up to, or I suppose we could ask for up to the permanent rate. We want to charge more. And you have to say what it's going to go for. And so and that piece, because you're still under the permanent rate, does not have to go every 5 years for a renewal.
So that would go to recoup the $2.40.
Or a portion thereof.
You
Yes,
don't have to go.
You wouldn't have to go the whole 3%.
Wouldn't have to go the whole $2.
So, okay,
yes.
This is what Beaverton just did. So they were facing a shortfall. They had this bracket. There's some articles out there if you want to read about it. They ended up going out for a portion of that to meet the needs of just the straight up city services. And I think that was this year. Isn't that this year?
Last year or two, yes.
I'll send you that.
No, yeah.
so if we have that $2.40, we wouldn't be here, but then we'd have to be providing our own fire service. Right? Is that?
No, the fire, so the fire district's still gonna get their $2.40. So that was part of the voter approved measure. And the voter approved measure brought down our rate.
No, sorry.
Sorry.
So if we had that $2.40, then we wouldn't be part of the fire district. Right. That's, yeah.
Correct.
But then we'd have to have our own fire service.
If the measure in 2005 never passed, correct.
Toby, this is fascinating. You just learned me a lot.
Good.
From a very good third grade teacher. This is like super fascinating, like Wilsonville being where they are. I mean, like I go out there every day and I see homes for $800,000. Big giant homes in there at the bottom of this list.
Well, in Happy Valley too.
Yeah.
But notice that that's how they make it work. They are $800,000 homes, so they're at a lower tax rate, but they're still bringing in a lot of money. Because and Wilsonville also has a big business, well, has a lot of industrial.
Another interesting way to look at this is something that I did when I was at the city of Tigard, because I would look just across at city of Tualatin. They have a lower permanent rate than Tigard does. Tualatin's permanent rate is $2.26. Yet they seem to have more robust services than Tigard did. And Tigard had a higher rate, not significantly, $2.51. You know, it seemed like their services were significantly more robust. And what it came down to was the amount of land that Tualatin has that's commercial industrial relative to their population. So their population is about 27,000. However, they were able to, their property taxes per capita was higher than Tigard's, even though their rate was lower. So that's something I haven't done with Milwaukee's, but it's another lens by which we can explore this information. And something that if we were to want to talk about property taxes further, I would want to bring forward to council.
And that is what I've heard about Wilson for sure, that their business industrial really bounces them higher.
There's a lot of literature out there that supports the notion that and not just literature, studies, that commercial industrial land demands less in services than it does in revenues generated to a city. And residential is the exact opposite. Residential, the revenues that residential brings into the city is less than the cost of services that residential land demands.
I'm gonna just take that whole thing a step back for namely the mayor who was on the council at the time. There were multiple reasons why when we were looking at the NMIA, the North Milwaukie Innovation Area, why we didn't allow housing to move into those spaces. But one of the reasons is this kind of levelization within our property taxes helps us provide our services. Without it, we would be in a lot more trouble.
Did you have other?
I have one more,
Yeah.
but all this talking made me forget it.
Well, we can come back with you.
Is it taxing?
I did also just want to put out there, these are generally tax revenues we hear about. We're totally supportive of getting more information. If you know of other streams that other communities are doing that you'd like us to look at and come back to you and talk about in 3 or 4 months. These are just the ones most commonly used. It does not mean they're.
Well, I know, like, for example, West Lynn looks low on that list, but West Lynn has like a $12 a month park fee. That's how they pay for their parks.
Well, Gresham does the same thing. They do a police fee as well, not just a levy.
So with the right of way,
Yes.
the utilities. So when our last meeting, and when we talked about charging Northwest Natural a different rate than PGE, is that the norm? Or the norm is just like everybody gets charged the same?
I can only speak to what I've seen. And what I've seen is that generally, utilities of a similar type get treated similarly. Unless there's some sort of maximum of that state law. So my memory is that on the telecommunications, 7% is the most that we can charge. And so that's why, for instance, at City of Gresham, they stopped at 7% for telecommunications, yet they're doing 10% for PGE, Northwest Natural, their own utilities. And so does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's it. Thank you, Tim.
absolutely happy to do this. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. So on the permanent tax rate, say we went out for, I mean, one of the topics we've talked about going out for is parks. But maybe we went out for some combo of things. I've seen cities go out for things in combo. Could we do what you said Oregon City did? Could we go for $1 or $1.10 or $1.50? And then with a clause that says we could do 3% a year or whatever.
Without the
Future councils could do, some amount per year.
based on my knowledge, yes, I would want to get the city attorney's opinion as well. However, since it would be still staying underneath the permanent rate, and again, the example is Oregon City basically said, here's the rate, we're essentially going to keep this 5-year plan, and then after that 5-year plan, we might And they kind of gave some conditions by which they might increase their rate. And they also guaranteed that the rate wouldn't increase by more than 3% per year in any given year.
That's fast.
It really was when I had talked to the assessor's office about Oregon City, and she didn't have all the background on it, so I went digging into both the measure that they passed and the ordinance that was the basis, and it was really pretty interesting, and I shared it over to the person I speak with at the assessor's office.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I have any other questions. That was some interesting information.
Mayor, could I ask you a question? Your supposition was that there'd be an increase with some stipulation that future increases would be limited to 3%. Is that right?
Well, I mean, that's what he said to Oregon City. It's saying we're going for $1.40, say now, and rather than making a future city council have to come back out, we're gonna say after X number of years, they could make annual increases not above 3% per year or whatever the figure would be, so that it resolves it in one vote and doesn't make a future city council have to go back out to the.
I understand the reasons, but I would also caution that if you're kind of hamstringing the future city council, and it's the same situation with the propositions that have put a 3% cap on property taxes, has kind of got us in this mess anyway. So
Well, I guess if it were hamstringing, I see it as helping a future city council, but I guess if it were hamstringing, that would be a question to be answered, is does doing it that way preclude them from going back out to the voters?
I think this is a good discussion.
Full Monty.
I don't have an answer, but I'm just trying to play the pro con here.
Yeah.
Of all
Yeah.
these.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good question to be answered, yeah. I would guess you can always go to the voters. For more, you can always go to the voters and say, okay, now we've done $1.40 and we did another 10 cents at some point. Rather than have this percentage limit, we want another change in the permanent rate. I think that's probably always an option. So I saw the 3% as a gift to a future city council, but it's a good question to be sure we know the answer to.
And just to make sure that something's clear in case it's getting commingled, is the 3% that Oregon City did is it's in the ordinance, and it's 3% on the rate, which is different than the 3% on assessed value. And there isn't something in state law that said that they had to limit themselves to 3% in any given year. It's just, that's the measure, that's the constraint they put on themselves.
Well, it may be better to frame it as cent in terms of cents. I mean,
That's another way you could do it.
to say not more than so many cents per year or something.
Are there any taxes that you know of that we did not talk about that you want to talk about? The person.
That's where all my tax are.
I don't know of any other taxes, but like I said, in terms of how cities fund things with fees, I did, learn a lot by looking at how they fund parks, and some of them have a tax rate and some of them have a monthly fee.
Absolutely.
And the state fee, they just have a monthly fee on there.
And I'm just coming closer so that picks me up for the minutes later. There's been a lot of pushback in some of those cities because a fee doesn't require you to do a voter approved content, right? So there's no process, you don't have to educate anyone, you don't have to have a discussion about choice. So typically, you get less pushback after the vote if you did this through some sort of levy or a property tax adjustment. Doesn't mean you have to do that way. I would say that the safe fee was actually run as an exceptional engagement process with the NDAs and the community members. And so I think there's a way you can make people feel included in it. But that's just something to be aware of, is a lot of the cities with those specialty fees would prefer to have property tax.
Yeah, Toby.
Can we get, I know that you got to make some changes, but can we get the slide deck? There's a lot of good info here.
Absolutely. I believe Nicole, it gets added into the,
Yeah, in the packet tomorrow and then also posted separately.
Okay, thank you.
But you probably want to fix that.
yes, I will fix.
For you, put it.
And I'm sorry, I was so focused on comparing Milwaukie to all the other jurisdictions that I totally missed the Milwaukie bond rate.
Okay, good. Thanks.
No offense, Joseph, that was one of the other presentations. That was really educational.
Thank you.
See how everything plays out.
So with that, I think we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Next
Mayor?
agenda item is
Yeah.
the supplemental budget, and this is the actual hearing, so we have a script and everything. Actually, you think I need a break, or we just gonna plow through? We're good? Okay. Public hearing on the supplemental budget is called to order. Purpose of this hearing is to hear the staff report, take public comments, deliberate, and consider adopting the supplemental budget resolution. Does any council member wish to announce an actual or potential conflict of interest? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to our finance director, Toby LaFrance.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Toby LaFrance, Finance Director. Here before you, as the mayor outlined, for a hearing on the supplemental budget, and we are looking for action from council this evening to hopefully approve the supplemental budget that's before you. And let me kind of go through the elements of what we're requesting. And we did cover this somewhat last night during budget committee as an informational item to the budget committee. And so just I'll try and be brief this evening. If you have some follow-up questions, then I'm here to answer them. So there's two really big things that this is going to do with our building department. We are asking for some additional budget authority there. A little bit of background, the budget department has 3 FTE, and yet over the last 5 years, their workload has increased by 27%, or they're roughly an additional 900 inspections per year that those same number of positions are having to undertake. To help work with the additional workload, we have contracts, and we use that to take the workload, and that's something that we need to pay. So because we've had more workload this year, our materials and services budget to help pay for those contracts, we're almost out of that budget. And we need to get through the next 7 months of the fiscal year. So we are asking for additional materials and service budget for the building department. In addition, we are going to see some very large developments coming, including Hillside and Main, to the city of Milwaukie. And part of the contracts that we have is when we're doing the plan reviews, if we're contracting it out, the contractor gets 65% of the building fee revenue. This is probably going to bring in about $1.5 million in building fee revenue. So our choice is we can take an unused position in community development, that's our housing and economic development manager position, and move it into the building department. We're not going to increase the FTE count within the city, we're simply gonna reallocate what we've got. That position will allow us to do that plan review in-house and retain the maximum amount of that fee revenue within the city. So that will more than pay for the cost of a fourth position within the building department, plus the additional materials and service budget authority that we're requesting. The second big thing that we're trying to do is our facilities department needs some help. We have been experiencing inflation-related costs to our utilities. When we have projects, the cost of the materials for those projects, the cost of the contracted staff for those projects has been increasing. So inflation has been impacting our facilities department. On top of that, we've had some other issues, including the chiller within this facility, which you've heard about recently, as well as there's just some additional projects that came about with new city hall, remodel that's happening at the Johnson Creek building. So in total, this action will add $280,000 to the facilities budget. Now, $200,000 of that is going to come from community development, where we've got some projects that we chose not to undertake. So the overall general fund impact is that we will be adding $80,000 to the general fund budget, because $200,000 is coming from community development facilities. The additional 80 is going to be paid for by our various utilities, which are also benefiting from the remodel at Johnson Creek building, and they're also benefiting from some of the general projects and utility rate increases that they've had to absorb. So 20,000 each from water, sewer, storm, and transportation funds. And then in addition to that, we've received some important grants for our parks, as well as solar array on the public safety building. And finally, we're doing a very small change in how we're budgeting for supplies within the new city hall, taking a small amount from individual departments within City Hall and consolidating that in the Office of City Recorder, who will then be in charge of doing that for the departments within the new City Hall. And that's the actions we have before you this evening. Staff is requesting that that council approve the supplemental that's before you this evening, and that concludes the staff presentation.
Just one quick amendment, this, in case anybody's watching tonight, the solar project's out at JCB.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Did it say, what did it say?
He said that it was at the public safety plan.
Oh, okay.
So it'll be out over the parking,
Questions? So I had one question, and I've all these years of being on budget, I thought I knew how to read budget documents, but I'm having this attachment, the last page in our packet, the attachment to the resolution. Most of it makes sense to me, but the building fund piece showed 1.5 million in increased revenue over projections.
Right.
So we've been seeing that increase for years. It's been like 3 or 4 years now. We're still underestimating when we do our projections.
I believe what we're doing is, one, we've been seeing some exceptional development in City of Milwaukee, and a lot of times when you do a financial forecast, you don't necessarily know that the really big development is going to come in, and Hillside's going to come in, and that's a really big development. So it's sort of the initial revenue forecast was done on sort of the base level revenues, and figured we would address, if we needed to, the really big development if and when it happens. So that's what we're doing this evening.
So is that 1.5 million all Hillside?
That is what we have, that's what we're estimating. So our building official's been crunching the numbers, and he's estimating 1.5 million conservatively.
Oh. Okay. Because I mean, yeah, we've been having a surplus in that fund for several years, and so I guess I was just surprised that we're still.
So one of the things that we did, at least historically, is Steve Adams and at the time Samantha Vandergrift would sit down and look at all the developments and the likelihood that the development would occur in the coming 2 years. And that's really the complicating factor, is whether or not they're getting approvals to develop or not. We've had a few of those, we own one of those right now. Where we have projects that we think are coming, but they still are just sitting there, and so putting that moment in time has been hard. We were waiting for inflation, which hit, but we expected it to come also with a recession that didn't hit, so it was just, it's some hard forecasting to do with as volatile as things have been.
Well, I do get that, yeah, everyone expected more of a downturn. Okay. Guess I have any other questions? If no one else has questions, then did we get any correspondence on this topic?
He did not.
Did not. Okay. Do we have well, I guess the community development director came to say goodbye to his.
Actually here because our building official is out at the moment, and so he's here to represent the needs of that team if there were questions.
Okay, got it.
But saying goodbye to his money is also helpful.
One city, it all goes, it's all good.
Do we don't, obviously don't have anyone in the room who wishes to comment. Do we have anyone online, Nicole?
We do not have anyone online, and there is no one has made a comment in the inbox.
Okay. Do I still need to read the script? Does anyone wish to comment on the proposed supplemental budget? Because we have no one in the room and no one online, I'm going to forego reading all of that script. Does staff have any response to the testimony? There was no testimony, so staff doesn't have any response. One last chance for questions from the council? No? Okay. If there are no questions, I will entertain a motion to close the public comment part of the hearing.
I move to close the public comment part of the supplemental budget hearing.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public comment part of the supplemental budget hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. None heard. It passes unanimously to close the public comment part of the supplemental budget hearing. Is there any discussion? Right, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the resolution authorizing the supplemental budget for the 2023-2024 biennium.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution authorizing the supplemental budget for the 2023-2024 biennium. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. None heard. The supplemental budget is passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for doing that. It's incredible to have more resources in the building. Okay. Appreciate that. I'm gonna go home. That'd be a great job.
Thank you.
Okay, all that's left are council reports. Nobody has council reports. Our first speaker tonight alluded to the urban growth discussions, and I think I sent you guys some notes on that back in October. It's an interesting, I'm going my second meeting. I was out of town for the second meeting, so I'm going to the third meeting this Friday. And it's an interesting discussion. It'll be a very interesting 6 or 7 months to come until we get to next summer and a recommendation. I feel like there was something else I needed to report on, but I am not remembering it now. So I guess I'll bring it back next time. So, yeah. All right. Well, if nobody has any other council reports, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. None heard. We are adjourned.